What's going on, everybody? Got a tutorial today dealing with the PS2 FAT, as you can see. Um, we're actually going to be dealing with the AV port today and dealing with no video issues. A very common issue on the PS2 FAT, as well as the PS2 Slim. So, a few quick notes before we get started. The Slim does have some similar issues, but most of this is not going to apply to the Slim. So, unlike some of the videos I do, this is really just for the fat. I may do one on the Slim later on. I may not. It just really depends. So, just keep that in mind. Um, all you're really going to need is some screwdrivers and stuff like that, because what we're going to be doing. Is we're going to go over a couple of problems because believe it or not, if you've got a PlayStation 2 that has video signal issues, there's actually a couple things that could be your problem. And so instead of just this being a tutorial that's like step one, do this, step two, do that, I'm going to go through multiple things that you need to check out. So essentially, we're going to kind of be troubleshooting and diagnosing the issue rather than this just be a cut and dry, three-step plan. The one exception to the screwdrivers is you're going to need something similar to this. I really don't know what these are called, but you can also use either a safety pin or, sometimes there's like sewing needles or sewing pins. Those will work too. So, yeah, if you've got anything like that, it needs to be just a really small point. Just keep in mind a ballpoint pen or a pencil will not work for this. And I would not use that because actually, the ink and the pencil lead can get in there and break or, cause you other issues. So use something hard, metallic, metal, kind of like this. Okay? So to get started, I'm going to address the most obvious issue. If you've got a video problem, you could always have an issue with your audio video cord. Believe it or not, especially the real generic ones, you see, I've got this one here. The real generic ones really cheap out on it, and they can wear out, especially if you move your console around, go to place, maybe go to a friend's house, or found one at Goodwill, or a thrift store or whatever. And yeah, this could be your issue. So before you ever start looking at anything else, if you haven't double checked your audio video cable, you can get one real cheap for just a couple bucks at the very least, just to test it. That way we can, rule out the cable itself. Because, like I said, these do go out, and especially back in the day, a lot of people would bring their consoles to buddies' houses and stuff, and plugging the audio video cord in and out a ton of times causes damage both to the cable as well as to the port, which is one thing we're going to be dealing with here today. Moving on to the port itself, and I want to make sure we're clear too, real quick. Being that we're talking about no video on the screen, this does not apply for power issues. So you want to make sure too that you're not actually dealing with a power issue. If you're plugging the console in and you're not getting any lights here, obviously you're going to have a power issue, not a video issue. Secondly, you can have a situation where you don't have any lights, but it's actually not the console itself. So even if you turn it on and you don't see the red light on the reset button, try hitting the reset button and turn the console on, because some of these, the LEDs will burn out, or maybe you've got a problem with the ribbon or something. So just double check and check that out. Some people do, believe it or not, get a power issue confused with a video issue. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Next off, we're going to do something that's actually pretty simple. This is going to require that safety pin or a tool like this, like we talked about earlier. This is caused by, now this is a 50-50 chance, just so you understand. There's a 50-50 chance this is your issue. And we'll move on to the other issue that it could, be caused by. So you're going to want to try this first because it's the simple and easiest, and you won't have to spend any money unless you need like a safety pin or something. like we talked about earlier, back in the day, you would plug and unplug and go back and forth over and over and over. We'd bring consoles to our friends' houses back then, and play with them in person, unlike today. So you get a lot of wear and tear. Additionally, the way this is designed is really terrible. They did improve it on the Slim. It don't have the exact same design. It's very similar, but it is different enough where you don't have the same problems, which is why I gave that disclaimer at the beginning of this video about the Slim. The reason why this gets messed up is it's just the bad design. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to fix it and see if that helps. Now, a good way to test first and foremost. Now I'm going to show it to you like this. Obviously, I'm not actually doing it. When you've got the console plugged in and turned on, and you've got your AV cable plugged in, what you want to do is you want to kind of take it and like rotate this way, up, down. You're basically putting just a little bit of pressure. Don't do it too much because you can crack something majorly bad. So we're just talking about a little bit here. And as you do that, pull it up, take a look at your screen, pull it down, take a look at your screen. Just try different positions. And what we're doing here is you're seeing if the video will pop onto the screen when you're doing this. If your video pops on while you're moving it around, then this fix is almost a guarantee for you because you don't have any other hardware issues. There are times where it's so bad that you even moving it around, you won't get the results I talked about where the video might pop on for a second. So even if you don't have that result, still do this test. It's just a good way to know that like the problem is the port itself. Because obviously if it is able to get a signal when this is moved around, then you don't have a hardware issue on the motherboard. So what we're going to do is now, bear with me because this is going to be really difficult to show on camera. Not only is it small in there, but it's also like really dark and stuff, so it's just hard to tell. So this is the top of the console right here, and this is the bottom. What we've got is on the top side, inside the port, you'll see that it's got a metal lining that goes around the inside, and then a layer of plastic that goes around the outside of that. That metal layer on the inside, on the top, which is on this side, there are what I call pressure clamps. These pressure clamps get worn down really easy, and that's what we're going to be doing with this pin. Now, again, be careful. Don't jam this thing down in there because you do have your connections for the AV port right here. So if you go ripping at things, you could accidentally break the plastic right here, and if you break this plastic right here, you're toast. The port is toast, and you're not going to be able to fix it with something easy like I'm about to show you. So if you look at the top here, you'll see that there's like a cutouts in the metal, and what those are pressure prongs. And you'll see that you've got just enough room, and this is why you need something super small that will fit in there, to essentially kind of get underneath those pins. And what you're doing is you're prying them downwards a little bit. Now, as you pry them downwards, what that's going to do is they're going to put more pressure on your AV cable, and it's going to allow it to make the proper connection. When these consoles are brand new out of the box, we're essentially just making it to how it was when it came brand new out of the box. This isn't anything where it's going to damage anything. We're just kind of trying to get it back to how it was. Just keep in mind that the more often you do this, the weaker that these pressure clamps get. So eventually, these metal clamps will be moved so much they could break out, and at that point you're screwed. So if you've got one that's already got weak clamps and you're having to pry them out, please try to make this like a console that doesn't move around. I know everybody moves into new places, and some people still take their consoles to different places. But if you've got a console that has this issue, make sure this is a console that's going to stay in one place after you get this fixed. Because the more and more you do this, the more the more damage that these pressure clamps, well, not damage really, but just the weaker they're going to get. It's just sheet, really thin sheet metal in there. This isn't some, again, it's not very well engineered. So all you're going to do is you're going to stick your pin there, kind of try to work it underneath those pins, and you're going to pry them out a little bit. And there's two of them, so you're going to kind of stick it and pry them outwards. Now, again, I hope I can get this close enough so you can see it. I've done it on purpose where one of those pins is too far down. You've got to imagine this like this. If one of the pressure clamps is sticking physically out, when you stick this in there, it's going to hit that pressure clamp and jam it down into the port. And once that happens, you're also screwed. So the ends of them still need to go back up into the console. So it should be kind of like a curved, curved shape, so that in the middle of the prong pokes out, but then it goes back into the outer metal shell. So in this case, again, let me see. I've got this one right here that I've purposely pried out. As you can see, you can hopefully see, you can see it's kind of sticking out where you can even see it. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you push it back in a little bit so that it's not. Okay? And now this one's good, but now you'll see that these in the middle stick out further, so they're going to put more pressure. Now, you'll notice once you've done that and stick this in, it's going to be nowhere near as loose feeling as it was before. And again, that's because those pressure clamps are now putting the proper pressure again. You can do this a couple times. So if you do it once and plug it in and you still notice it's a little too loose, you may have not pried it out quite enough. So you can adjust it a couple of different times. Like I said, just be careful. Don't put any pressure on that piece of plastic that's in the middle there. That plastic is very brittle in this day and age, and you don't want to break it. So yeah, just be careful. So for the most of us, or the most of you that's going to be trying to figure out how to fix this, well, not most, about half of you, that's going to be your problem. Believe it or not, it's just as simple as that. It's amazing what bad engineering, or cheap engineering at the very least, can cause. Now, if you've done this, if you've gone in and adjusted it and stuff, and in the cord, in fact, you can, when I was showing you earlier, this was able to go everywhere. Now it's way more stiff. It doesn't have a wiggle to it anymore. If you've done all that and you're pretty confident that, it's putting good pressure on it, and you still have an issue with the video not showing up on the screen, then the last thing you want to check is just look for, again, on that metal shield, the same one that's got the pressure prongs. See if it looks really bad and rusted and dirty and stuff like that. If the console was in a very humid environment, it can cause it to rust and get dirty. And so what you'll want to do then is just try to give it a quick clean. You could just have some contacts in there that are really, really rough. It doesn't happen much. But yeah, that is something you want to check. All you got to do is use something like a pipe cleaner and some rubbing alcohol. I actually don't have pipe cleaners. I don't use them very much. Actually, what I do is I take a Q-tip and I kind of pull the cotton bit off of it, so it's kind of like floppy and hanging off, and then smush it, and then I'll put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it. Don't need but a couple drops. And then, especially on the again, this is the top of the consoles here. So on the top side is actually where the contacts are inside this port. So you're going to kind of lightly do that and just rub it in there. And you're just doing this to get a good little clean. Don't force it in there. If the cotton is too thick, spread it out thinner. It's actually pretty pliable, believe it or not. And then you're just doing it like that. Okay, and then give it a good 10-15 minutes to make sure it fully dries up, and then try it again. Sometimes that'll also solve your issue. Now, If you're at this point and you still have video issues, then unfortunately, what we're going to be dealing with is a much more difficult problem. And usually, this is a hardware failure. The PS2 does have some IC problems where they will fail. Of course, a capacitor problem. That's an issue for any console this old in this day and age. Um, so you're going to be dealing with a motherboard issue at that point. Now, I can't go through every in and out because like trying to fix a motherboard with a component failure is multiple videos by itself. So I can't really show it to you in this purpose. But what I will say is your best bet at this point is what you're going to want to do is actually look into replacing the motherboard. Because the vast majority of you, if you want to try to repair that motherboard, you're talking about soldering, a lot of component, micro soldering. You'll be checking a lot of components, but I will go over it briefly with you just so you know where to start and have a good idea of, how to get going if you want to try to tackle it. Just remember that if you don't have any soldering skills or anything like that, I do not recommend you try that because it's not a novice or beginner friendly. Excuse me. It's not a novice or beginner friendly type of soldering job. Plus, it also needs a pretty high end soldering iron. So what we're going to do is we're just going to open this and take it apart, and I'm going to kind of show you the concepts of checking out the motherboard. All we're going to do is some models have a couple in the front. This one does not, but keep that in mind. You may have a couple extra ones up here. But what we're doing is we're prying up these plastic screw covers and the rubber ones, and that's exposing our screws so we can open the console. Also, while I'm doing this, you do see I have gloves on. I will use them when I'm dealing with electronic components, mainly because I deal with so many of them that it is inevitable you'll eventually have an issue with static electricity. But contrary to how a lot of people will tell you or make you think, it's actually not as big of a deal as you think, and also pretty rare. Most static electricity charges that will cause you issues will only cause you issues if the console is plugged in and turned on. So, of course, make sure you're doing this while it's not plugged in, and you're going to avoid those issues. So you don't have to use the gloves. I just like to because, what I said earlier. We're going to flip it over after our screws are out. And then, this one actually has a seal. So we're going to take our original Sony seal off the back here. You can just pry it up, or you can just cut it. Remove the expansion bay. And as you can see here, in this particular console, we've got rust in here. That's a bad sign because this is a console that has bad audio, bad video. And so I'm starting to think that our issue is going to be some sort of damage, water damage. What you're doing here is we're kind of just pulling up from the back outward, pushing out, and then you're going to want to be careful because most versions have this ribbon for the power button, so you don't rip that out. Because if you rip that out, then you've got a whole nother problem on your hands. You can stick a screwdriver, pull it outwards to pry this out. Then there's two main screws that we remove right here. On the controller port, I should mention. These actually hold to the case, that's why we're removing those. And then you'll be able to just lightly pull this off. Oh yeah, some nice rust in there. Now on the bottom here, real quick, some versions, the power supply is on top. Those are the very, very, very early versions. So if you have the power supply on top, this is a little bit different, but the concepts are still the same. And the motherboard's a lot different too on those. Okay, so there is a pin connector, so you gotta kind of have to lift that out, and then it connects to the actual power cord plug, so you have to remove that. Just take all our metal off. There's a little sheet here, and then we've got a bunch of tiny little screws. Do make sure that these little tiny screws that we're taking out are not lost. They can kind of fall underneath. You see there's tons of holes and stuff. Don't lose them, because this is what holds pressure. Okay, sorry about that. I had to cut my air compressor actually cut on when I was doing that. So I've already went ahead just taking all those screws out. What we're going to do now is we're going to kind of, there's the fan cable right here. Be very careful with this. These things are very weak. So pull it very lightly, and then we're going to get that out of the way. Oh, there's a screw. Forgot about up here. And I got to get in there with one of these to get this one by the fan. Get that out of the way. And then what you have is you've got like a couple of clamps that hold the disk drive on. We can kind of pry those off. And then we're going to start removing our ribbons for the disk drive itself. Let's see. Oh, and I forgot another screw. Okay, now this is a little tricky. You got to kind of wiggle this metal off. Also check your prongs here on the back. You may have to pry those off again. It's very easy for them to slip back on to the disk drive. And then we're just going to carefully separate this from the motherboard like so. And this way I can show you real quick what we're talking about. I'm going to remove these ribbons for the rest of our connections. Get that out of the way. So now we got the motherboard, and we're going to flip it over, pull it off. Oh wow, as you can see, I think I've probably found our issue on this one. As you can see, there's a ton of roach droppings and all that fun stuff. So more than likely what we've got here is we've got corrosion from this. If you see that, and I hope I'm getting it good enough, but there's just a lot of crap on there. That's all that's left over from roaches and stuff like that. And when you don't have audio or video and you see a lot of heavy roach stuff, that actually, believe it or not, causes corrosion very similar to leaking caps. So if you see this on the motherboard, I would go ahead and stop, because it's not just going to be a cap issue anymore. You've probably got trace damage and stuff like that. And again, your best bet is going to be replacing the motherboard. Now, just like my other videos, make sure you check the link in the description. I will put some links down there. Those will lead you over to my website, where you can find motherboards and get a replacement motherboard for yourself. So if you do get to this point, make sure you check that description. Luckily, these things are not very expensive. I mean, the most expensive one I sell, I think, is $35. So it's going to be a lot cheaper than you replacing the whole console. For this particular one, it's clear that that's going to be my issue. And as you can see, it's also right near the audio port. So I can guarantee you I've got trace damage from all the droppings. All that stuff is very corrosive. If you don't have that problem, this is what we're going to be looking at next. These little circle things are all capacitors. These are going to be the things you're checking next if you're trying to make an actual physical repair on the motherboard. There's a lot more things that can go wrong. You can have major chip failures, similar to, let's say, an Xbox 360 Red Ring of Death. These also do have a little bit of overheating issues, so you combine that with time, and you can have major chip failures on the GPU and CPU and stuff like that. But you're going to need something like this, which is called a multimeter. And what this does is this could check your volts, your ohms, you know, your resistance, etc., etc., etc. And what we want to do is you're going to want to check each capacitor to see if it's within the spec. Now the spec, there are some kind of loose diagrams out there, but the spec for these is just going to simply be, you know, what's on top of the cap. So we've got, you know, our numbers right here on top of the caps, like this one, this little one right here, that's a 16 volt. We would check it and make sure it's pumping out 16 volt. The problem is that, of course, when you do this, you do have to have it plugged in and turned on. So you've got to have a couple things connected to it to, you know, you've got to have like your power and reset button connected so you can turn it on, and your power supply. But this way you can hand check each one. Or you could just go ahead and try a recap. This group of caps right here is your best bet to start with, because as you can tell, these are obviously going right from, you know, they're going right to your AV port and stuff like that. So start with replacing these, and then you can still have issues with these. You would more than likely have to just do a full recap on this. Again, now if we're already talking about stuff that is a little bit too far out there for you, then you still always have the option of replacing the motherboard like I was talking about, and just check the description. And that's all I'll really get into now, because beyond the caps, what you're going to be dealing with is you can continue to actually check lines and stuff like that, but it's just not worth that. More than likely, you've got a major chip failure or something like that, and you know we're talking about a major hardware failure, and then your only option is really going to be replacing the motherboard at that point. So that's pretty much all I'm going to cover on this right here. Like I said, I think adjusting those clamps inside the AV port is literally going to help at least half of the consoles that I deal with, and you know they have no video. Literally, it ends up working out to about half of them are always those clamps in the port. So that'll help more people than you realize. And then, as you can saw, I just tore this out myself. It doesn't require soldering or anything. So if you do feel like you have to replace the motherboard, or if this trick didn't help you, if that fix didn't help you, then yeah, it's not hard to replace the motherboard. And like I said, it's going to be way cheaper than just buying a whole new console, and less wasteful. So anyways, that's pretty much all I got for you on this one. I hope that helped you out. I hope the fix especially helped a lot of you out up here. Again, it's not a guarantee. It's just, you know, there's a lot of different problems that can cause this, but I really wanted to make that video for that purpose, because I bet you there's a lot of people throwing stuff away and stuff, not realizing that simply just prying out those prongs again will get you back to gaming. So, you know, I want to try to help people preserve as much of this old hardware as we can. So anyways, that's all I got for you guys. Don't forget to check that link in the description if you need a motherboard. And until next time.